On July 26, 2022, the Palašac Bridge was open to tourists. Travelers will finally be able to use this bridge, construction of which was finished a year ago. Croatia is a country with a strange shape, as you can clearly see. We have a big end here in the north and another big end here in the south. The two are well isolated from each other. Bosnia separates these two ends. The border is a bit special. In this video, we will see first the history of the border to better understand it. Then we will see how this country is structured. History. If Croatia has this shape, it is because it had it during the Yugoslav era. Croatia was one of the entities of that federation. And this border within Yugoslavia? Well, it simply corresponds to the border that existed in the past between Austria and the Ottoman Empire. It's as simple as that. Austria actually had two parts, obtained at two different times. The northern part corresponds to the original Croatia. The southern piece, on the other hand, was obtained much later. It is what we call the Kingdom of Dalmatia, and this Dalmatia corresponds to the colony that the Republic of Venice had. That's why it is practically only coastal. Venice only needed maritime posts. But there is also another part, the Republic of Ragusa. This part belonged to Venice in the past, but became independent. These two territories, Venice and Ragusa, were conquered by France, which gave them to Austria, which owned Croatia. That is why today Croatia has both an inland territory and a territory along the coast. Network. Croatia has a transportation network that has been created in this rather strange shape. But first, let's look at where the main cities are located. Not surprisingly, the largest city in the country is Zagreb, the capital. As a whole, the city has more than 1 million inhabitants. For a country with only 4 million, almost 30% of the population lives in this agglomeration. Let's take a look at the subdivisions of Croatia. The country is divided into counties. If we take the 9 counties in the center, we get almost 2 million inhabitants, which is half of the country's population. This region is the so-called real Croatia, or Central Croatia, or clean Croatia. This is the Croatia that has been populated by Croats for a long time. Even though more than half of the country's population lives here, there is no big cities except for Zagreb. To the east is another cultural region, Slavonia, whose main city is Osijek. It has 100,000 inhabitants. The whole region, even if it does not correspond exactly to historical Slavonia, has 800,000 inhabitants. This is equivalent to 20% of the country's population. The motorway network is thus articulated around Zagreb, with highways going north, south, east, and west. Several highways go to capital cities. The third one goes from Ljubljana to Belgrade, through Zagreb, for example. It is the oldest highway in the country. At the time of Yugoslavia, it was called the Highway of Brotherhood and Unity because it was supposed to connect the Croatian world with the Serbian world. Building this connection began in the late 1970s, but it was not until the 2000s that the two cities were connected. These interior regions in Croatia are currently undergoing a serious demographic crisis, but the one that is suffering the worst is the Lika region in the mountains not far from the Adriatic. In 1961, the Institute of Statistics already noted that the population had decreased, and on the contrary, the only area where the population increased was on the coast. The Mediterranean coast is kind of a gift that was given to Croatia. Originally, this region was populated by Italians, Slavs, and Dalmatians. If we count the 7 coastal counties of Croatia, we get a population of 1.4 million inhabitants, which is 1/3 of the country's population. In fact, this Mediterranean region is historically populated. In the 1859 census, Split and Rijeka were the 2 most populated areas in present-day Croatia, and today they are among the largest agglomerations after Zagreb. Indeed, Split is the 2nd largest city in the country. There are about 200,000 inhabitants in this area. This city was called Spalato in Italian times. The 3rd largest city is Rijeka, called Fiume in Italian times, 150,000 inhabitants. The 5th largest city is Zadar, Zara in Italian, 75,000 inhabitants. And there you have it, the 5 largest cities in the country. Highways have been built, one that goes all the way to Rijeka, and another one, much longer, that goes all the way to Plaća, in the far south of Adriatic Croatia. And here, as you zoom in on the map, you'll notice that there is a small complication. There is a part of Croatia that is isolated from the rest of the country. The country shape is not simple, but there had to be a piece that is not attached to the rest of the country, and this part is Dubrovnik. But we will see all this in the next part. Tourism. Croatia joined the European Union in 2013, and this integration was not a gift. It just accelerated what many former European socialist countries are experiencing: emigration. It is difficult to estimate how many people leave the country each year. It is estimated that about 50,000 people do so from Croatia each year. Croatia is simply the third country in the world in terms of the largest population decrease. Bulgaria and Latvia are dropping even more, and it is no coincidence that they are all in the European Union. This union is a gas pedal for migration from the poorest of them. In 2023, Croatia is expected to join in the Schengen area, which will further accelerate the process. But it will also accelerate the process of tourism. And thanks to this gift from heaven, Istria and Dalmatia, Croatia, is one of the most important tourist destinations. The 5 major airports in Croatia are the following. The first one is that of Zagreb. The next 4 are on the coast. Let's take a closer look at the main tourist cities on the coast. In the very north, we have Pula, the capital of Istria. Pula is located at the very end of the peninsula, and it is certainly better connected to Italy via its highway than to the rest of Croatia. It has the 4th largest airport in the country. Pula is called Pola in Italian and was under Venetian rule for several centuries. At the corner of the peninsula is Rijeka, the 3rd largest city in the country. It is a port city, and not only for Croatia, but during the Austrian era, it was also the main port. And even in the Yugoslav period, it was the main port of the country. Being more industrial, this city is less dependent on tourism. Then, a little farther south, there is a large coastal area, very sparsely populated. There are also islands with a total of more than 20,000 inhabitants. Krka Island has been connected to the mainland via a bridge since 1980. Further south, we find Zadar. The highway is not far away. The city center of Zadar is really insular. It is a small inhabited fortress on an island. We see the Venetian style of building on water. The airport of Zadar is the 5th largest in Croatia. Even further south is Split, a city built on a peninsula. It has the 2nd largest airport in the country. There are other interesting towns along the coast, such as Šibenik, in almost enclosed waters, or small island towns like Trogir and Korčula. And finally, even further south, after an almost deserted area, we reach Dubrovnik, a very isolated city whose center is located on a kind of rocky island, like a typical Venetian city. It was called Ragusa during Venetian times. And even if the city has only 40,000 inhabitants, its airport is the 3rd largest in the country, with 2.5 million annual passengers, which is huge compared to its population. As you may have understood, this coast is a very big asset for Croatia, as it is very touristy. It is estimated that 5% of the tourists go to the hinterland outside Zagreb, and there are more tourists going to Dubrovnik than to Zagreb. So this very small city, Dubrovnik, is very interesting for the local economy. By the way, tourism represents about 25% of the country's economy. This is huge compared to other countries in the European Union, where the average is around 10%. It is the most tourism-dependent country in Europe. It is obviously always a little dangerous to be too dependent on tourism. The COVID crisis particularly affected the country, but today Croatia remains the country with the largest GDP among the former members of Yugoslavia. Dubrovnik, as I said before, is separated from the rest of Croatia. There is a stretch of Bosnia that separates the 2 territories. Since the territory of Dubrovnik corresponds to the Republic of Ragusa, which belonged to the Republic of Venice, a state entirely turned towards the sea, the coastline is not very important. The cities of the Republic of Venice were connected by the sea, and this pattern is somewhat similar to the Norwegian cities that I mentioned in the video on Norway, but the Croatian cities are well connected by highways today. This great layout is an achievement. We have a wide double lane in a very unfriendly landscape with a lot of relief and very few inhabitants. This highway is quite empty, but it is mainly relied on to facilitate the arrival of tourists. Most of them come from Slovenia, Austria, Germany, and Italy. Moreover, Croatia has fully entered the Italian market. Italian resorts have always attracted people from Germany and Austria. Today, Croatia has recovered this clientele, almost becoming a mini Germany during the summer. But this Bosnian space remains problematic and forces tourists to pass customs twice to go from one side to the other. That is why the project of a bridge between continuous Croatia and the Pelješac Peninsula was launched. The Pelješac Bridge was built in 2021 and opened in 2022. But Bosnia has an extremely inconvenient access to the sea. It is a very small strip of land with barely a small town, and the only way to get there is by going around this peninsula. All the boats going to Bosnia will have to pass under the bridge. Bosnia has done everything to prevent the construction of this bridge, asking the European Union to stop funding it. But the European Union has financed 85% of the bridge. But all this is nonsense. It was a Bosnian border that was not a problem in the Yugoslav era, which isolated a portion of the inhabitants of Croatia. And this bridge is there, not to counter nature, but to counter a political border. Because if the border did not exist, it would have been enough to extend the highway, and there would be no questioning. Well, in short, that's all I have to say about Croatia. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks a lot.